He was the CEO, but today he was treated like nothing. Rick Harrison sat alone in the waiting area. His gray hair looked unwashed. His shirt was wrinkled. He leaned forward, rubbing his aching knees. Brittany Miller, the young receptionist, didn't even look up. She scrolled through TikTok. Her fake lashes fluttered as she laughed at something on her phone. She flipped her blonde hair and took a selfie, smiling sweetly at her own reflection. Minutes turned to hours. Rick cleared his throat softly. He shifted in his seat. Nothing changed. To her, he wasn't the CEO. He wasn't even a person worth greeting. 3 hours, completely invisible to his own staff. Rick sat in his office a few days earlier. Golden light fell across his mahogany desk. On the wall hung his award, CEO of the Year. He looked at it quietly. The glass plaque shone under the morning sun. Bold letters. His name carved deep. It was supposed to be a moment of pride, but his eyes held no joy. He leaned back in his leather chair. Outside his window, the city moved fast. Inside, a heaviness pressed down on him. He thought about his team. Their reports showed glowing numbers. Customer satisfaction, retention, sales. All perfect on paper. But deep inside, he felt something was missing. Something real. He had all the awards, but he didn't have the truth. Rick entered the spa branch that morning. The reception area was silent. Cool white lights glowed overhead. The air smelled of disinfectant and lavender oil. Black leather chairs lined the waiting area. They looked expensive, smooth and polished. Each chair sat perfectly in place. Not a crease, not a stain. The marble floor shone like ice. Everything felt cold, sterile, empty. On the glass counter sat a gold business card holder. Inside were cards with elegant fonts. Luxury medical spa. Heal, renew, glow. Rick glanced around. No laughter, no greetings. Just quiet. Just surface beauty. It looked perfect, but it felt lifeless. An elderly woman stepped up to the counter. Her hands trembled as she reached for her wallet. She pulled out a silver credit card. Her fingers shook against the shiny glass counter. Brittany didn't look up. She flicked her wrist, waving the old woman away. Her voice was flat. "Wait, I'm busy right now." The woman lowered her card slowly. Her eyes blinked behind thick glasses. She looked down at her shoes, small and worn. Rick watched from his seat. His chest tightened. He saw her shoulders slump. No one deserved to feel that small. She just wanted to pay, but Brittany couldn't even give her a moment. Rick watched the old woman walk back to her seat. She sat down slowly. Her card slipped back into her purse. Her shoulders trembled under her thin beige coat. Rick took a deep breath. His eyes followed Brittany as she laughed at her phone. He felt a tight pull in his chest. His mind whispered a question. If they treat her like this, how do they treat everyone else? He glanced around the spa. Clean leather chairs, silent rooms. Customers waited quietly, staring at the floor. The spa looked perfect on the outside, but under the bright lights, he saw something broken. He didn't need reports to see the truth. He saw it in their eyes. Rick closed his eyes for a moment. A memory returned. He was 20 years old. His hair was dark and thick back then. He wore a simple white uniform. He stood behind a spa counter, focused and quiet. He poured hot water into a small clay teapot. Steam rose around his face. He placed the cup on a silver tray. His hands moved carefully, making sure nothing spilled. He walked out to a waiting guest. He bowed his head slightly. "Here is your tea, ma'am." The woman smiled back at him. Her eyes were kind. In that moment, he felt proud. He felt useful. He once believed true service could change someone's entire day. Rick opened his eyes. The memory faded. He was back in the cold, bright spa. Brittany glanced at him for half a second. Her eyes narrowed. She shook her head with a small smirk. To her, he was just an old man taking up space. She turned her phone around. The camera faced her. She tilted her chin lips, parted in a soft smile. Her fingers tapped quickly on the screen. Click. Another selfie. Rick watched in silence. He felt the weight of disappointment settle in his chest. He thought of the tea he once poured with care. He thought of the respect he gave every guest. She didn't see a customer. She didn't even see a person. The glass door behind the counter opened. Debbie Sanders stepped out. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. She wore a navy blazer and a pearl necklace. Her hair was tied tight in a neat bun. She glanced around the reception area. Her eyes landed on Rick. They paused for just a second. No smile, no greeting. She turned away. She walked to the product shelves. She began rearranging small bottles of serum and cleanser. One by one, she turned each label forward. Rick sat still watching her. She didn't look at him again. She didn't ask if he needed anything. She was the manager, but she couldn't even see the people in front of her. Debbie stayed by the display shelves. She picked up a glass jar of anti-aging cream. She turned it slowly in her hand. She checked the label, then set it down with care. Next, she moved the bottles of serum. She lined them up perfectly, each one faced forward, labels straight. She wiped a tiny speck of dust off the last bottle with her fingertip. Customers sat waiting behind her. No one called their name. No one offered water or a smile. Debbie never turned around. She didn't see their tired eyes. She didn't hear their sighs. Rick watched her closely. She looked so busy, but she wasn't serving anyone. She managed products with care, but ignored the people who needed her. A woman shifted in her seat across the room. She wore a gray business suit. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail. She checked her watch, her lips pressed in frustration. She looked towards Brittany at the front desk. Her voice was calm, but her words were sharp. "I've been waiting for 20 minutes. Brittany didn't look up. She kept scrolling on her phone. Her thumb moved lazily across the screen. The woman sighed. She leaned back in her chair. Her eyes closed for a moment. Her shoulders fell heavy with disappointment. Rick watched her. He felt his chest tighten again. He saw her patience break bit by bit. One customer felt ignored. Another felt invisible. The cracks were everywhere. Brittany glanced over at Rick. She raised an eyebrow and smirked. She leaned closer to Debbie, keeping her voice low but sharp. "That old man isn't buying anything anyway." Her lips curled in a small laugh. She tucked her phone under the counter and flipped her hair back. Debbie didn't respond. She kept adjusting the skincare bottles in front of her. She moved one jar half an inch to the left. Rick heard every word. His hands rested on his knees. He felt his jaw tighten. His chest rose and fell with a silent sigh. To them, he was just an old man with no value. They never imagined who he really was. The treatment room door opened quietly. Emily Carter stepped out. She wore a soft cream uniform. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Her eyes were warm and gentle. She glanced around the lobby. Her gaze landed on Rick. She paused for a moment, reading his tired posture. She walked over to him with quiet steps. Her voice was calm and caring. "Would you like some ginger tea, sir?" Rick looked up. His eyes met hers. For the first time that day, someone saw him. Someone spoke with kindness. He nodded softly. His lips formed a small, grateful smile. She didn't see an old man. She saw a guest who needed care. Rick looked up at Emily. Her eyes were gentle and clear. She held his gaze without fear or judgment. For a moment, the tightness in his chest eased. His shoulders dropped slightly. His hands relaxed on his knees. He noticed the small details about her. Her name tag read, "Emily Carter, Therapist." A faint scent of peppermint oil lingered as she moved. Her uniform was simple but neatly pressed. Rick felt warmth in her presence. He gave her a quiet nod. His eyes softened and a hint of gratitude flickered across his face. In that simple act of kindness, he saw hope. Debbie glanced at Brittany, so she lowered her voice, keeping her eyes on the display shelves. "Take a quick TikTok for me," she whispered. Brittany giggled softly. She lifted her phone and flipped the camera. Debbie smoothed her hair and adjusted her pearl necklace. She tilted her chin up and smiled with closed lips. Behind them, customers sat waiting. Rick watched as Debbie posed, shifting slightly to show the product shelf behind her. Brittany tapped the screen, recording a short clip. Neither of them looked at the guests. Neither saw the quiet frustration growing in the room. The manager cared about her image, but not the people she was meant to lead. A young man stood up from his chair. He wore a navy suit and polished black shoes. His phone buzzed in his hand, but he ignored it. He looked towards the counter. Brittany was still filming Debbie. Neither of them noticed him. He shook his head slowly, his lips pressed into a thin, hard line. He turned and walked towards the door. His footsteps echoed across the marble floor. He didn't say a word as he left. The glass door closed with a quiet click behind him. Rick watched in silence. His chest felt heavy. Another customer lost. Another person made to feel invisible. People came for care, but left with nothing. Rick shifted in his seat. A sharp pain shot up his lower back. He pressed his hand against the ache, closing his eyes for a moment. His shirt pulled tight across his shoulders as he leaned forward. He took a slow, careful breath. The clean scent of disinfectant filled his nose. The leather chair felt cold under his palms. Around him, the room stayed silent. Brittany and Debbie were still chatting softly by the shelves. No one noticed his discomfort. No one asked if he was okay. Rick opened his eyes again. He blinked against the bright white lights overhead. A dull throb pulsed down his spine. Pain reminded him he was human, even if no one else seemed to see it. Debbie turned away from the product shelf. She spotted Emily standing near Rick, her brows pulled together in mild annoyance. She spoke in a low, sharp voice. "Go clean room 4, she said. "Forget about the customers out here." Emily paused for a moment. Her eyes flicked towards Rick. She saw the pain in his hunched shoulders. She saw the tired look in his eyes. But she nodded quietly. "Okay, Mrs. Sanders." Debbie didn't look at Rick. She turned back to the shelves, adjusting another small jar of cream. Her focus was only on the products, never on the people. She managed rooms and bottles, but ignored the human needs right in front of her. Emily turned towards Rick before walking away. Her eyes softened with quiet apology. She saw him sitting alone, shoulders slumped, hand pressed to his lower back. She wanted to help. She wanted to bring him that ginger tea she promised. But Debbie's words echoed in her mind, her lips pressed into a thin line. She gave Rick a small nod, almost invisible. Her eyes said what her mouth could not. "I'm sorry." Rick looked back at her. He saw the kindness in her gaze. A flicker of warmth touched his chest, even as the pain in his back pulsed again. Emily turned away slowly. She walked towards room 4, her steps quiet and heavy. She cared, even when she wasn't allowed to show it. Rick watched Emily disappear down the hallway. The lobby fell silent again. Only the soft hum of air conditioning filled the space. He shifted in his chair. His back ached. His hands rested heavily on his knees. He looked around at the polished floors and perfect shelves. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked clean. But something felt wrong. Deeply wrong. He took a slow breath. His eyes narrowed slightly. They need to relearn what customer service really means, he thought. Not smiles for show, not scripted greetings, but simple kindness, real care. Rick felt a quiet resolve grow inside him. He knew what he had to do. He came today for answers. Now he knew what needed to change. Brittany sat back in her chair. She held her phone close to her face. A bright smile spread across her lips. She pressed play on her new TikTok clip. Laughter burst out of her. Her shoulders shook as she giggled loudly. The sound echoed through the quiet lobby. Customers glanced up, eyes tired and confused. Debbie looked over and smirked softly, saying nothing. Brittany covered her mouth, still laughing. She flipped her hair back and typed a quick caption. Her thumbs moved fast across the screen. Rick watched her. His face stayed calm, but inside disappointment burned deep. She was so busy entertaining herself, she forgot why she was there. To her, work was just a stage, and the customers were nothing but a background. Rick took a deep breath. Slowly, he placed his hands on the arms of the chair. He pushed himself up, feeling the tight pull in his back. He stood tall, despite the pain. The room felt silent around him. Brittany kept laughing at her phone. Debbie continued rearranging jars on the shelf. Rick's voice was calm, steady, but it carried a quiet authority that cut through the air. "I would like to speak to the manager," he said. Brittany froze for a second. She lowered her phone, eyes narrowing. Debbie turned around, blinking with slight surprise. Debbie turned to face Rick. She tilted her chin up slightly. Her eyes scanned him from head to toe. The corner of her mouth lifted in a small, dismissive smirk. She crossed her arms over her chest. Her pearl bracelet clicked softly against her watch. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. Her tone was flat and cold. There was no kindness in her voice, no hint of respect. Rick looked at her calmly. He said nothing yet. His eyes stayed steady, locked on hers. Brittany watched from behind the counter. She tried to hide her smile. She didn't know who she was speaking to, and she didn't care. They thought he was just another old man. But that was about to change. Rick took a slow breath. He reached up and removed his old gray cap. His thinning silver hair caught the bright lobby lights. With quiet focus, he straightened his wrinkled shirt. Then he pulled down his navy vest, smoothing the front gently. His eyes stayed locked on Debbie, calm, unblinking. "My name is Rick Harrison," he said. His voice was firm but steady. "I'm the CEO of this entire spa chain." For a moment, the room felt frozen. Debbie's eyes widened slightly. Her arms dropped to her sides. Brittany stopped breathing, her phone still in her hand. In one sentence, everything changed. Brittany felt her chest tighten. Her smile disappeared instantly. Color drained from her face, leaving her skin pale. She looked down at her phone in her hand. The TikTok app was still open. Her fingers trembled as she quickly locked the screen. She lowered the phone behind the counter, hiding it out of sight. Her eyes darted towards Rick, then to Debbie, then back again. Panic flickered across her face. She swallowed hard. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. For the first time that day, she had nothing to say. Rick stayed silent. He watched her calmly, his eyes clear and steady. She thought he was no one, until she realized he was the only one who mattered. Rick stood tall in the silent lobby. His eyes moved from Debbie to Brittany. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved. He took a slow breath. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath each word. "Gather all staff," he said. "Right now." Debbie blinked quickly. She opened her mouth as if to argue, but stopped. She nodded stiffly and turned away, her heels clicking sharply across the marble floor. Brittany stayed frozen behind the counter. She clutched her phone tight, her knuckles turning white. Rick watched them both with quiet focus. There was no anger on his face, only deep, steady purpose. They didn't know what was coming, but he was ready to show them. Rick turned his gaze to Brittany. She shifted under his stare, her eyes darting away. He spoke with quiet certainty. No anger, no raised voice. Just truth delivered like a final verdict. "You're fired," he said. "Effective immediately." Brittany's mouth fell open. Her chest rose and fell quickly. She tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. Her phone slipped from her hand and landed softly on the counter. For a moment, the entire lobby stayed silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Rick didn't look away. His eyes stayed calm, clear, and unblinking. She thought no one was watching, until the only person who mattered saw everything. Rick turned his eyes to Debbie. She stood stiff and silent, her hands clasped tightly in front of her navy blazer. Her pearl bracelet rattled softly as she shifted her weight. Rick spoke calmly. His voice was steady and low, carrying every word deep into the quiet room. "Titles don't make leaders," he said. "Actions do." Debbie's eyes glistened slightly, her lips pressed together in a thin line. She looked down at the marble floor, unable to meet his gaze. Rick stayed still for a moment. His words settled heavy in the air around them. Truth that couldn't be argued, truth that demanded change. He didn't need to raise his voice, because his words carried all the power. Emily stepped out from room 4. Her eyes widened when she saw everyone gathered. She held a clean towel in her hands, folded neatly. Rick turned to her. His expression softened for the first time that day. He gave a small nod of respect. "Emily," he said quietly, "you've shown what real service looks like." She blinked, unsure what to say. Her hands gripped the towel tighter against her chest. Rick reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a folded paper and handed it to her. "This is your promotion," he said. "Assistant Operations Manager. Effective today." Emily's lips parted in shock. Her eyes filled with tears that shimmered under the bright lights. Leadership isn't about power. It's about lifting up those who truly care. Emily held the promotion letter tightly in her shaking hands. A tear rolled down her cheek. She blinked quickly, trying to hold back more. Her chest rose and fell with quiet, overwhelmed breaths. She felt every eye in the room on her, but all she saw was Rick's calm nod of respect. Suddenly, a warm, wrinkled hand reached out and touched hers. Emily turned. The elderly woman from earlier was standing beside her. Her eyes were soft and bright with gratitude. "Sweet girl," she whispered. "Thank you." Emily smiled through her tears. She gently squeezed the old woman's hand. Her heart felt full, finally seen, finally valued. She didn't just serve customers, she touched lives. Rick stepped out into the morning light. Cool air brushed against his face. He took a deep breath and looked up at the wide, endless sky. Behind him, the glass doors closed softly. Inside, a new chapter was beginning for his team. But outside, he felt a quiet peace in his chest. His eyes narrowed with calm focus. He knew there was still more work to do, but today he had made it right here. Leadership isn't about titles. It's about understanding. It's about action. He turned and walked toward his car. Each step felt steady, purposeful. Have you ever faced customer service, this bad comment real leader, if you believe true leadership is about action, not titles?